Chair Iverson is unable to attend tonight's meeting, so as acting chair, I will now call this meeting to order. First order of business is to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. Commissioners, is there a motion to adopt the final agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the final agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Our next order of business is to adopt the minutes from the January 18th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Commissioners, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for our last meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Vansky. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwarting. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. We are now moving on to our discussion items. We have one discussion item on the agenda for tonight. It's item 3.1, the final plat of Marsh Hollow, first edition, submitted by Golden Valley Land Company. I will now turn it over to Community and Economic Development Director Marty Dahl for the staff presentation.
Thank you, Acting Chair Pedersen, members of the commission. Yes, we are here tonight to review the final plat application for the Marsh Hollow First Edition. You all will recall this was brought forward to you for preliminary plat under the name of Rolling Hills South. So just a little bit of background about how we got to where we are today. So there was a combined sketch plat and neighborhood meeting that was held on April 20th at the Planning Commission. City Council also reviewed that sketch plat on April 26th. The preliminary plat, which I just noted, was reviewed and recommended for approval by the Planning Commission on August 17th and approved by the City Council on August 23rd. And the parcel that is up for final plat this evening was officially annexed by the Minnesota Office of Administrative Hearings into Victoria on September 23rd. So a little refresher on the location and area. This is in the city's south growth area, just south of the Hunters Brook development. It is a portion of 10580 Victoria Drive. It's west of Victoria Drive and again, south of the Hunters Brook development. The first edition that's before you this evening for final plat includes 51 single-family lots, which will be rental community, and 55 townhomes, which would be owner-occupied. The total proposed, including the anticipated future second edition, would be 110 single-family lots and 103 townhomes, which is the same as you reviewed during preliminary plat. This property is a total of 71 acres with approximately 45 of those being developable. It is guided for both low density and medium density residential. So the area just to the west of the Chaska Creek is anticipated for low density residential at approximately 3.8 units per acre. And the area east of Chaska Creek where the townhomes will be located comes in at about 6.5 units per acre. So both of those are consistent with the comprehensive plan density guiding. As was included in your background packet, this is the portion of the final plat including the townhomes east of Chaska Creek, and then the single-family homes and lots on the west side of the creek. So as this development did receive preliminary plat approval, what the Planning Commission is really tasked with is just ensuring that the final plat has not significantly changed since preliminary plat and that all conditions of the preliminary plat have been met or will be met. So we'll just run through some of those conditions or those conditions that were included as part of the preliminary plat approval. First being the ordering of annexation, and as I noted, that annexation was ordered on September 23rd. The second being approval of zoning to PUD with R1 and R3 underlying zoning concurrent with final plat. The council will be considering that zoning ordinance. A draft was included in your packet concurrent with final plat approval. Number 3, adhering to all shoreland requirements related to Chaska Creek, and staff does believe that the development is adhering to all of those applicable shoreland requirements. addressing all items outlined in the staff and engineers memos. So those items were resolved, and the final construction documents are nearing completion, and they are to be completed prior to recording of the development. Number 5 was addressing all berm and buffer requirements, including those related to the adjacent railroad tracks. Staff believes the berms and buffers do appear to be compliant with all city requirements. Number 6, complying with all regulations and conditions of the Carver County WMO and receiving their approvals. Those final approvals are in the works and will also be required and conditioned upon final plat prior to recording. Dedicating required right-of-way for future County Road 11 expansion and deeding to the city all required stormwater, pond, wetland, and park outlets. On the plat, adequate right-of-way is being shown, and outlots are anticipated to be deeded through the development agreement to the city. Number 8, acquiring any necessary easements from the adjacent property owners. This is for the construction of Creekside Lane as a collector roadway, which will be shared between this property and the property to the north. The roadway easement has been drafted, and that will be required to be signed and recorded as part of the recording. Number 9, providing the city with copies of all HOA docs and covenants for the development. The full HOA docs and covenants will also be required for review prior to recording here in the next couple of weeks. Number 10, including disclosures about the proximity and impacts of the Marsh Lake Hunt Club, future through street extensions, and all other standard disclosures. Those are to be included in the HOA docs and will be required to be in those docs prior to recording of the development. Number 11, entering into a development agreement with the city. The council will consider that DA as part of their final plat review in a couple of weeks. Number 12, providing a letter of credit for all public improvements associated with the development. That letter of credit and fee payment will be included in the DA and be provided to be required to be provided prior to recording. Obtaining all necessary city, county, PCA, and other regulatory agency approvals and permits prior to construction. As I mentioned, some of those regulatory organizations are finalizing their review, and those approvals will be required prior to the development being recorded. Submitting title work and complying with the city attorney's plat opinion. The title work has been submitted for review, and the plat opinion was just shared with the development team here this week, so they are working on making any of those necessary adjustments. And then finally submitting the final plat within 90 days of the city council approval of preliminary plat, and that was also adequately addressed. So moving on just into the development itself, and again, this is all a refresher from the preliminary plat, as these are all the same zoning and lot regulations that you saw here a few months ago. So the single-family lots will be zoned PUD with an R1 underlying zoning. These are located west of Chaska Creek. As you'll recall, that is contemplated to be a rental community, so all of those single-family homes will be rental and a more villa-style home and lot. So they're looking at 6,100 square feet min lot area, 51-foot width, 120-foot depth, 7.5-foot side yard setback on each side, 25-foot front and rear yard setback, as well as corner setbacks from the streets, and a maximum impervious of 60%. The townhomes will have an underlying zoning of R3 east of the creek. Those are contemplated to be 1,125 square feet per unit, with a minimum unit width of 25 feet. Minimum unit depth of 45 feet, with setbacks off of the public street of 15 feet, 20 feet from the private drive setback, a 25-foot setback from the collector roadway, and a minimum building separation of 20 feet on the side and 30 feet on the rear, as well as a maximum impervious surface for the building itself of 95%. There is also Clubhouse proposed as a lot within this development. That would be for the single-family rentals. It would include a swimming pool and fitness area. Part of our discussion during preliminary plat was related to parking with this clubhouse facility. So staff and the applicant are continuing conversations related to a shared parking agreement between the adjacent park and the clubhouse that will go into place temporarily until the second addition comes forward. It is contemplated to include some parking on the dead-end turnaround portion of the collector roadway that will be constructed up to that point as part of the first addition. And then, as I noted, the single families are intended to be a rental community, and Planning Commission and the City Council appeared supportive of that concept during preliminary plat review. Moving on to buffer and screening, the applicant is proposing a berm and 40-foot buffer as well as 223 trees being planted along the homes that are adjacent to the railroad tracks on the southeast side of the development. A question about whether or not a fence should be required or included was part of the Planning Commission and City Council's discussion. And I think ultimately the direction was that a fence was not necessary when we've got the berm and buffer in this area. There's also some buffer and screening requirements related to double and triple fronted lots. Those are in the townhome area, and you can see them in the red circles. Anywhere where there is a double or triple front between either a private and public roadway. And they are intending to meet the planting requirements and buffer requirements for those areas. Trees and landscaping, so the development will be retaining 43% of the significant trees on this site. With the updated tree preservation and replacement ordinance, they are required to replace approximately 1,139 caliper inches, which is approximately 383-inch trees. The applicant is planning with the first and second additions combined to plant approximately 2778 caliper inches, which is about 926 3-inch trees. That includes in the first addition 350 lot boulevard and miscellaneous trees, 296 berm buffer trees, and 98 shrubs. With the second addition finishing that out with 280 lot boulevard and miscellaneous trees, as well as an additional 74 shrubs. The development is required to provide park dedication, as park is contemplated in the city's comprehensive plan in this area. So they are intending to do that through the dedication of Outlot J, which will be dedicated as a city park. This outlot does also contain a large tree stand, significant tree stand that will be preserved within the park boundary. There will also be some trail credit that will be provided, and the final details of the park dedication will be contemplated through the development agreement that will go before the city council. As part of this first addition, the applicant is proposing to include 6-foot concrete sidewalks on both sides of the roadway in this higher density townhome area, as well as 8-foot bituminous trail along the collector roadway. And then as we go down into the single family area, 6-foot concrete sidewalk on one side of the roadway with trail continuing to the construction boundaries on the collector roadway, as well as, you'll recall, a trail network that wraps behind the development and would be anticipated to be continued as part of the second addition. Access to this development is being provided from Game Farm Road off of Highway 11 to Creekside Lane, which also goes up into the Hunters Brook development. Game Farm Road will be a full access roadway. And as I mentioned, future extension of Creekside Lane to the west. You'll recall during preliminary plat, there was some conversation related to the limited access into this area. The applicant has worked to offset their utilities in the creek corridor, which was one of public safety's biggest concerns, and saw as a potential choke point if utilities and things needed to be replaced. So that has been addressed to their satisfaction, and that, along with the fact that the collector roadway will be extended to the west, has satisfied those public safety concerns. As I noted, there is some required right-of-way dedication for the future County Road 11 expansion project, which is still projected for sometime this year. That 16 feet of right-of-way is being dedicated, which is adequate, and all of the other local streets will be built to city standards with 60-foot right-of-way and 70-foot right-of-way for the collector roadway. Site utilities and stormwater, the utility plans are being finalized, and as I mentioned in the conditions, the final plat will be conditioned upon final approval of all of those construction plans, similar, to the stormwater plans, which are also being finalized with Carver County Carver County WMO, and those will also be conditioned upon final approval. So with that, the final plat is generally consistent with the preliminary plat, and all conditions appear to have been met or will be met as part of final plat conditions before approval or recording. So staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the final plat for the Marsh Hollow First Edition with the following condition: that addressing all of the items that have been outlined in the most recent staff and engineer response memos, as well as final city approval of those construction plans, entering into a development agreement with the city, paying all applicable fees and providing all required financial guarantees, the final approval from the CCWMO, executing and recording the necessary easements related to the construction of the collector roadway Creekside Lane, complying with requirements of the city attorney's plat opinion, submitting and recording HOA documents or covenants subject to city attorney review, the disclosures that we have discussed, including the proximity to Marsh Lake Hunt Club, proximity and impacts of the railroad, future through street extensions, etc. Complying with all applicable requirements, reviews, and approvals of city staff for any entrance or monument sign plans that would be intended to be included. Recording of this final plat with the county within 120 days, and then furnishing the city with a certified Mylar copy of the plat evidencing that filing. So with that, Acting Chair Pedersen, I will turn it back over to the commission for any questions or discussions. We do have Matt Pavick with the development team here, who's also available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Director Dahl. I'll now open the floor to the rest of the Planning Commission to discuss. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments?
Actually, I have a couple of questions. For the easement that's being needed to essentially put in Creekside Lane, is that correct? It's Dave that owns that property to the north, correct?
That's correct.
Does he have an agreement to have that property sold at this point?
My understanding is that he is continuing to work with Tradition Development, who developed the other portion of his property, and that they are working to develop that part. We do not have any formal applications in for that parcel yet, but
And he didn't own this parcel that these two.
he did not. No, that's a separate property owner.
So he's essentially granting an easement to come on his land to put a road in it, correct?
That is correct.
Right, and did the city pay for that easement?
No, that was worked out between the two development teams and the two landowners.
Okay, and then so do we have a development, in the development agreement, that when Dave does sell that land and it gets developed, that portion that's in the easement will be deeded to the city for ownership of the road?
Commissioner Vansky, Chair, members of the commission, what will likely happen is that will be platted as roadway. So you'll see it within similar to how you're seeing half of the roadway platted on the screen in front of you. It will be platted as the other half of Creekside Lane, which once it's platted as right of way becomes public infrastructure.
Okay. And then I know that we had some concerns about the disclosures that were being given to purchasers. And then now there's the issue of that this is now going to be largely rental property, that the train crossing is not going to be a whistleless stop. And did we ensure that the disclosures about the train and the potential noise and along with the game farm noise that needs to be a consideration of someone coming in to purchase or rent?
Yeah, Commissioner Vansky, Chair, members of the commission, as was noted, that will be a condition of the final plat, that those disclosures are included in those disclosures. And perhaps Mr. Pavic might be able to talk to us about how they typically provide those disclosures and things to their residents, so.
Yeah, that would be great, because for my concern is that at some point in the future that somebody doesn't come back to say, this thing is over 500,000 to put this in, and the city should pay for it because they didn't think about it when they approved this subdivision. Want to avoid having that take place. And then, granted, on the other side of the road is not even the city of Victoria, so there is the issue of the farmer who owns that land, who's lived with the noise all along, but it could become a fever pitch situation with 40-plus homes sitting along the edge of that. Thank you.
Commissioner Matt Pavic with the development team. The disclosures are going to be in two different forms. So one will be with the rental community. It'll be part of their lease agreement. Will be that disclosure will be presented to them. I don't have, they're working on that document at this point. They're well aware of it. It's going to include the railroad, the gun club, and then other typical disclosures that they have. And then for the townhome, it's going to be a for sale product, so that'll be, again, at the front end when they're signing purchase
The first owners
agreements.
will be notified about it, and
Yep.
then the chain starts to drop off from there.
Right, well, the rental will be anytime there's a new lease.
Okay.
It'll be part of that.
So that'll be a perpetual feature of the lease
Of the
then?
lease part, but in terms of the for sale product, yeah, you're right. The original owners will be made aware, and then it's their responsibility to turn that over to if they sell it, to the next owner as a part of a typical disclosure, I would think. But again, we could talk about other options.
Yeah, and Commissioner Avansky, Chair, members of the commission, as you'll recall, those documents do get recorded with the property, so they are part of any title work that's pulled when a property transfers hands, but we all know not everybody reads all of that paperwork and things, but it will be recorded, so it'll be part of the property record for perpetuity.
Great, thank you.
I have a question about Creekside Lane. Do we happen to have an aerial that shows an overlay of how that will flow into the adjacent parcel to the west?
We did have some ghost platting that was done as part of this, just to the adjacent property. I don't know that I have it available handy to pull up, but as I recall, with the ghost plat, it was contemplated that it would come primarily straight across, at least through the next parcel or two. From where it goes then beyond that, I'm not sure of the exact anticipated alignment. Of course, that alignment can change a little bit depending on topography or wetlands or things there, but.
Yeah, there's a decent amount of wetlands in the property to the west, so I was just I'm sure that's been thought through, because there's not a lot of grace. I mean, you can't really go too far north or too far south because you've got that round little shaped wetland that's immediately to the north, so.
And as I recall, Matt, we looked at that when we were looking at the exact placement of that, trying to find where on the properties of the west it's going to fit through best, which kind of dictated where it ended up falling within the development.
Correct. As it extends west, it is primarily all on upland. There is some wetland to the south of the future road, and then there's like a small one just to the north, and then there's some upland around, but the majority of the collector road is on upland.
Okay.
So.
I have one additional question. Utilities, I know we're getting that finalized right now, but can you comment to when the sewer and water, that work will be complete?
So currently the development to the north, so utilities have been extended down, that has been brought down into the Hunters Brook development. And I know that Hunters Brook got quite a bit of their, at least in their first phase of of those utilities put in this last fall. But I would anticipate anything remaining, and I don't know, Matt, if you have a timeline of when they think they'll be at your property line, or they may already be there.
Yeah, I don't know actually their stats, but I think you're right. They're working at that south end, so we anticipate that they'll be there by the time we need them to be there, because we'll be grading right away in the spring, so we'll need utilities in June.
So sometime in spring.
And the city's utilities have been extended, so they are in Hunters Brook now, and now it will be Hunters Brook responsibility to get them to the property line.
Thank you for that.
Marty, can you pull up the townhome aerial? And maybe Matt, you could just talk to us a little bit about, and maybe with the parking plan. I know it seems like there's a little bit of additional parking, but it's really a little bit. And what your experience is with, there are 2-car garages, as I recall. They could park in their driveway with 2 cars, but is there any additional parking for guests? Because what we sometimes see happen is people fill their garage with stuff pretty reliably. And then they park behind there, and then have friends come, and then there's no parking. So then they park in the middle collector road between the units, and then we have a fire hazard situation. So I'm just hoping that you can talk about what the plan is behind that so I can understand better, because I don't see a ton of that extra parking.
Marty, do you have our layout that shows the parking?
Yeah, this one is missing, and I think that it's
So
Yeah.
on
as he's looking
L1
for that, I can just talk through,
1.2.
like you said, there are 2-car garages, and there's 2 spaces in front of the garages for 2 more cars. And then there is the private driveways they're actually no parking allowed on those.
So the driveways can't have parked cars?
No,
Or-
the private
The
roads.
corridor drive between
Yeah,
the units,
Those
okay.
you can't park on because they're too narrow.
Well, it can. Nobody polices it, right?
That's what I'm worried about.
And then
You're
there-
not supposed to park in it.
Right. Then there are off-street parking, guest parking spots peppered kind of throughout the project.
Do you have a parking count on that?
Not off the top of my head.
Because I'm trying to count it, I'm struggling. That's why I'm asking. Like, I'm used to being on the plating, and I don't see the numbers, so I was just wondering. And
And then there's also street parking on the main road coming through on one side of the street.
can you point that out?
Yeah, we're pulling it up. I'm not connected to the network, so Isaac's getting it for me on a flash drive, and then I will transfer to
Kinda
this
have it
machine.
here, and I was looking at it, and I was just struggling to get much of it. And
So what we try to do is spread out that guest parking within walking distance of certain numbers of units to kind of keep it, so we didn't have all the guest parking way at the south end.
I
You know,
think we
that sort
talked
of.
about that last time, and that
Yep.
was the recommendation, and so I'm just trying to follow up on that recommendation and make sure that there actually is some spread out parking, because I just know that the phone rings and they call the city and they're like, there's nowhere for my guests to park, and my guest got a ticket for parking in the middle, and my neighbor just screamed at me because my guest is in the middle of the road they're not supposed to park on.
Yeah.
And I just want to see it so I can visualize, and I'm having a hard time on my PDF seeing it very well. And maybe I'm wrong, but I see like maybe 7 or 8
There
additional
might be
parking
7 or 8 in
places.
one spot. There's
Okay,
like
so
4 or
then
5
I'm just,
spots like
that's why I
that.
want to see it pointed out, because I'm like, I think there has to be more than that.
Yeah, there are.
You have it?
Commissioner Murray, Chair, members of the commission, I believe off the top of my head, there's 20 off-street kind of pocket parking spaces scattered throughout the townhome portion, but Marty will pull that up here.
Okay. Because I'm definitely not seeing 20, but, well, I see 4 kind of,
So we've got 4 of them up along this private drive up here.
Yep.
We've got 4 of them in this area here. We'll have another 6 down. This will be part of the second edition, this area here. And then am I missing any additional?
Oh, that would-
I think
That's it,
that-
those
I think
three.
that's all
Those
the
are
bump
well, there's
outs.
4 Yeah, there's 2 areas on the south and 2 on
2
the
here and 2 here. And then as was noted, there will be parking allowed on one side of the public roadway here as well.
So that roadway could probably, 50 cars or something like that could,
I think they have the
50?
cars marked.
yeah,
50?
I would guess probably about 50 cars could park on one side of the road there or more. So it's a significant amount. If you had a big party, that's what people would and should park. You wouldn't want to create so many guest parking spots that They never.
I don't want you to waste money building parking, but I just want to try to keep the back end from becoming an issue.
Would the parking be on the outer?
Is it the outer ring or the interior ring of that street?
I think it's the outer side.
You would think because you come in, yeah. You come in from up above. Are the yellow dots to
This is,
like cars?
no, this was a tree landscape plan that we were marking up, but it was the most
It's a good.
readily accessible one that showed the parking in it, so ignore the dots.
There's no actual, besides the street parking, is there any have we put into place any kind of numbers for parking on multifamily townhome type developments like we would with like a multifamily, parking counts in Victoria? Or are we not running on, I know we don't have a lot of townhomes, so that's probably part of it.
Yeah, and Isaac, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we treat townhomes similarly to how we treat single family, which means two need to have space for two vehicles, I believe.
Yeah, Commissioner Murray, acting chair, members of the commission, it's 2 spaces per unit with 1 enclosed space. So the attached.
So the driveway counts as their parking.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Can we address some kind of signage along that Birchwood Circle that addresses like temporary parking only? We don't want to see cars parking long-term in those spots.
Commissioner Moore, Chair, members of the commission, so we will be signing one side of this street as no parking. So that's part of the plan, is one side of the street will be signed as no parking. And then the long-term parking on streets is typically handled through the code area. So I can't recall what the specific language within the code is, but a vehicle that hasn't moved within 48 hours, whatever it is a code violation. And then that'd be something either the sheriff's office would go out and address and look at, or Keith may go out and take a look and mark and see if it moves in 2 days, and then would be addressed through that method.
So in other words, there would not be a sign on the other side.
There would not be signage indicating no long-term parking, because we'd likely run into that situation or potential request in every street. So it's handled more on the code enforcement side.
Okay.
Do you know what side of the street the fire plugs are going in?
Good question.
Do you know what side of the street the hydrants are on?
It might go back and forth. I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm just thinking from most of the neighborhoods I've been in, the opposite side of the street's the street where the parking's available and the other side is not.
That's a good point.
Commissioner Schwarting, any other questions?
I don't have any other questions. I think it generally follows what we approved early on.
Anything else? All right, hearing no more discussion, I'll ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend the city council approve the Marsh Hollow First Edition final plat and zoning with conditions as presented and discussed.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore. May I get a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. With that, we'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you. The motion carries. Thank you. All right, moving on to the miscellaneous section of our agenda. Staff, are there any items on miscellaneous that we would like to cover this evening?
None from staff, acting chair.
I do have one.
Sorry, one from staff, acting chair.
Acting chair, members of the commission, as is tradition, we do have new art in the chambers here this evening, so you have another ballot to vote again to pick out your favorite art piece, so please do so.
Do we have anything else thank you, Isaac. Do we have any other commissioners with any other comments for the miscellaneous section? I stumbled over that word twice.
I do want to ask, we talked about it, I think, a while back. Obviously, we have a lot of developments going in. If we continue to do the, bluegrass sod, continue to then require more water, it would seem like if we're going to allow something different or push for something different, even though the city has enough capacity, there's still a limited amount of water. Now would be the time before this goes in. So I don't know if it's a city requirement that says, hey, you have to sod the yards, because if it is, bluegrass sod may be the only sod that's available. Or are we going to push for and allow a more drought-tolerant grass to go in that needs less water? When you look at the comments from last time with the Savannah property and backing up to with development going in, and I think one of the comments was all about the water. And I remember walking down Cochia and seeing the one gentleman, I talked to him briefly, tearing his sod out because it died. So I'm sure that comment could have come from him or it could have come from others. So it just seems like we have a golden opportunity to change course with these newer developments going, and we have like 4 of them?
Yeah, Commissioner Schwarting, Chair, members of the commission, thank you for bringing that back to our attention. What I will do is I will go back and have a conversation with our city engineer just to get a better understanding of what our design standards are, and I will plan to report back at our next meeting on the 14th what I learn.
Great, thank you.
I have a question. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask this, but is there any kind of update that can be provided on Victoria West at this point? I'm sure you've got lots of behind the scenes activity.
Things are looking positive. As you all know, that the city entered into a preliminary development agreement with Kraus Anderson. We as staff continue to meet with them once every other week to discuss and make sure we keep moving things forward. The Steiger Lake Lane upgrade plans are at like 60% design right now. So we're working with KA on how do we marry those two projects together with the development. So I know I keep saying this, but I keep meaning it. We're very optimistic that we'll be having an application coming forward, hopefully by this spring.
And their parcel, they just have one parcel of the overall project, correct?
Right, that's the intention as part of their concept that they've developed thus far. It hasn't been completely parceled out. That'll be part of that first application that comes forward. It'll need to be surveyed and a parcel will need to be generated out of that. But that's the intention, that they would have one piece of that, essentially the area where their building pad was shown when they were here before you and the city council last fall.
And the general area is still the most eastern portion, right?
Correct.
Okay. Great.
Anyone else?
Well, I'd like to bring forward for a miscellaneous discussion, the Planning Commission, the report of the January 24th City Council meeting.
Excellent. Thank you.
It was an especially delightful meeting to attend because it started off with a workshop at 6 p.m. to discuss the city's acquisition for the emergency purposes of an unmanned aerial vehicle policy, and then, of course, the desire in moving forward on purchasing such unmanned aerial vehicle, which, for the sake of brevity, there is a policy that the city council was asked to approve, and then that policy was made part of the consent agenda. But some of the benefits of such vehicle will be to help search and rescue, find potentially dangerous portions of building burnings that might still be on fire. When firefighters can go in, they can use the vehicle to sort of use infrared technology to see that there might be fires still burning. There seems to be a treasure trove of things that this vehicle could be used for outside of search and rescue. For instance, Marty and Isaac and Keith can use it for answering perhaps Commissioner Murray's question about do we have an aerial view of this property and see what's there, they can use that in advance of any potential platting of the subdivision to survey the terrain without actually having to physically walk around and be able to see things that even a site walk might not discover. So there really wasn't any controversy surrounding the city's acquisition or potential misuse or any potential liabilities that the city might have about the data they collect and move forward. So I think that it's going to be a nice addition to the toolbox that the fire department and the city in general have. My own personal comment about it would be that it seems like one isn't enough. That there will be once it's used, there will be probably many more uses that pop up. And I'd add that just on the if staff wouldn't mind bringing back a concern of this commissioner would be to at the next year's policy review to strengthen up the policy a little bit so that we have defined consequences for misuse of that device. The policy seems to be a little bit on the weak side. I'm drawing back on my experience of being in finance committee and working on a lot of policy that it would behoove us to just make it clear to employees of the city and anybody who might use it that this is a device for the city, for the city's purposes. And I know that people like to have fun with things, but maybe flying the device over a swimming pool full of teenage girls may not be the best use of that city property. And just to make it clear that we are, although we know we're grown-ups, that there could be for instance a violation of the city's code of ethics and subject people who misuse that to disciplinary actions. That was just that's my own. I didn't want to take that item off the consent agenda to kind of bring those concerns. I just figured that we could address that and you guys could pass those comments appropriately if you would, please. Outside of that, then we moved after onto just a general city council meeting. Some of the things on the agenda item were that the city adopted a proclamation honoring African American History Month, which and especially that our council is now more diverse than it was in prior years. Kudos to the city council for being able to recognize the individual contributions that a diverse population brings and serving a diverse population. It's an honorable task that the city council took on. Along with that, the city also made another announcement that the Citizens Academy is opening up, if I recall correctly, and that to welcome anybody who wants to participate in that. And then finished out that conversation with that there are planning commissioners whose terms are expiring, and that the application window is open for anybody who wants to put their hat in the ring. And of course, naturally, the planning commissioning members who are expiring are certainly welcome to reapply, because the city council feels that the job that's being done is of excellent quality and would want to seek to keep continuity where possible. Onto that, then the city just moved on to the regular agenda, and not all that different from the last 5-minute world record city council consent agenda approval. As I indicated, nobody pulled anything off the consent agenda for the future discussion, so that moved forward. Then the city had part of their regular agenda. There was an adoption, a resolution adopted for the support of Carver County's Commission on Belonging, which has a 10-goal plan of how to be more inclusive of members of the community. I'd encourage people to kind of go through that and see where the city council's mindset is on adopting those goals.
Can you repeat that last thing about belonging? What's that called?
Sure.
It's communities of belonging.
Okay, and where do you access this?
We should be able to access it right from the packet, correct, Marty?
Yeah, Commissioner Vansky, Chair, members of the commission, there's some background information in last city council meeting's packet. And then I believe that Carver County Public Health is starting to put some information out on their website about it. It's an initiative that they are trying to get support from, not just from city government, but from communities, cities, people within the community, to provide resources, ideas, opportunities to really try to generate more sense of belonging. Sorry, I hope I didn't steal it.
Oh, perfectly fine. And I was just going to ask you a question. Do you think that that's appropriate for us to maybe review that when we go back and review the Urban Land Institute on where we want housing to be? Is there any crossover that's beneficial, or is your thought that?
Yeah, Commissioner Vansky, Chair, members of the commission, I think in some of those values, there may be some benefit. I think the communities of belonging is more of trying to instill, a value set of the things that you can do in these opportunities. So as far as direct correlation of anything they're doing, I'm not sure at this point in time, and it may grow and evolve to be more related to some of these areas, but I think certainly from a value standpoint, there is some connection there.
Okay, thanks, Marty. Moving on, then the Park and Rec provided their year-end report, and it was presented by none other than Commissioner Iverson's wife, who outlined some of the major accomplishments that Park and Rec did over the year, mainly Lake Wasserman Park, the Boulevard ash tree where that was protected against the emerald ash borer. There were numerous park dedications. They evaluated 35 parks for inclusion into our comp plan. And then most notably in one of their accomplishments is something that is very dear to Commissioner Pedersen's. There is an outdoor pickleball coming to the top of their agenda of being able to, I can't read my notes very well, to dedicate a space for that near the Victoria Rec Center. They touched on park maintenance and repairs, and then mentioned the work on Bavaria East Trail. Even though it wasn't successful, it just brings them to, I think it's fair to say that they say, we'll just try harder on that initiative. And also on the agenda was the Planning Commission's end-of-year report, which was presented by Chair Iverson. In the sake of brevity, we went through it laboriously before. I'll defer to our own notes and our own agenda items for that if anybody wants to go over that ground a second time. And then last was a sketch plat review of the sketch plat that we looked at previously in our Planning Commission meeting. I think that the City Council was generally in sync with our viewpoints and the items that we raised of concern for being addressed, and probably like the highly contested portion of it was the question of the extension of Cochia Lane and the traffic patterns that will be created and what can be done to mitigate flows. All the things that we talked about were essentially brought back up, and we're essentially in the same spot. That I think that Marty might concur that the problem seems well defined now. It's just move on to solutions.
Yeah, and Commissioner Vansky, Chair, members of the commission, I'll just to piggyback off of that, we are intending to engage one of our engineering pool consultants to do some additional traffic study of that area as a result of this development and the other development and the connection, so that we can have a better understanding of likely traffic patterns as this development moves forward to a preliminary plat. So we'll have hopefully some good information to share related to that at the next phase of that development coming before folks.
Right. And I think that it's fair to say that Lennar seems to want to move quickly on their development, and it feels as though there's a kind of a thought that we need to get this right, and we need to focus on that. And if it means that development gets slowed up just a touch, we only have one opportunity to set the stage here. And if we don't get it right, then we'll never be able to change it. So, and as Chair Iverson likes to say, you know, we work to get things done, but we work to get things done with the best interest of our community. So I think that everybody was generally receptive to this new idea. And with that, I will turn things back over to
Acting Chair Pedersen. Thank you, Commissioner Vansky. That was a great outline. I just have a couple questions. How are we doing on applicants for the Planning Commission?
Please encourage your friends and neighbors and people that you know to apply. If there's anyone that you know that you think would be interested in joining this group, we certainly can use more applicants.
Marty, I remember when we were getting on the commission, there seemed to be a larger pool of people interested. Have we went back to any of those people to say, we're back into this process again and adding to our commission?
Commissioner Murray, Chair, members of the commission, we burned through that list pretty quickly looking for alternates, and we're still in a situation where we're short some alternates. So we did get through that 3-person deep list previously. So
Has any promoting on, Facebook or LinkedIn occurred?
yes, yep.
I've seen it.
Yep. But again, I think, and I'm going to just pontificate just for a minute, but I think word of mouth and hearing from folks that actually do it, I think is a good way to try and recruit more folks. So I genuinely, if there are people friends, neighbors in the community that may be interested, I'd encourage you to encourage them to at least look into it. So.
Thank you. My last comment is, did anybody else in this room today attend the Land Use for Commissioners webinar? Show of hands. I attended it today, and if you get a chance, I'm not totally sure where the webinar is going to be available for commissioners or the public, but I thought it was very educational and brought a lot of things together, especially on the differences between conditional use, interim use, and variances. I won't say I got lost. I know what they all are, and I've worked with all of them in the past, but then the full understanding of how one of those could continually come up and how you would want to change that back into a different type of a zoning ordinance, it rang home. I'm like, okay, I get it a little better now. So it's 45 minutes of comprehensive commissioner type work. I'd recommend it to anybody starting off, and anyone who's here who's interested in checking it out, I would do so.
Acting Chair Pedersen, members of the commission, I do believe that they are planning to send out a link, so as soon as I receive that, I'll share it with the rest of the commission. So if you get an opportunity, you can watch it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Who hosted the event?
LMC.
Good deal. Any other items? With no other items, commissioners, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Commissioner Moore. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Kuhn. Thank you very much. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.